So good afternoon, everybody. This is Andy Brown, the piCalculator trainer, and welcome to our webinar today on using scenarios on piCalculator. Hopefully you've been able to join without too many difficulties and that you can see both screen and also you've got audio as well. Really pleased to say that today's session is being led by our MD, Mark Hewitt, and I'm going to pass over to Mark now, and he'll take you through using scenarios.
Marvellous, and thank you very much, Andy. So hello and welcome to the fifth in our series of piCalculator webinars. My name is Mark Hewitt and I'm the MD of piCalculator. Over the previous webinars, you'll have seen how piCalculator makes your work of valuing personal injury and clinical negligence claims so much easier, ranging from low value whiplash claim all the way up to a multi-million-pound catastrophic birth injury. And it's always been my view that by removing the mathematical gymnastics from the process, it allows you the time to better evaluate the evidence, the reports, and the claimant's needs, rather than concentrating on the intricacies of splitting multipliers. A bit of housekeeping for the webinar. We will be taking questions, and if you can type them in the comment section, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. So please feel free to ask away, and I'll attempt to answer them at the end. If you do experience any technical difficulties during the presentation with either the video or the audio, don't worry. There will be a recording of this webinar and it will be published at the end of the session, or probably a couple of days after the session, and we'll send out a link to that. And finally, thank you very much for attending this webinar, and I hope that you get to find it useful. So in today's session, we're going to have a closer look at scenarios. What are they? Why would you use them? And actually, how do you go about using them on piCalculator? So the first part, what are scenarios? Have you ever thought to yourself, what would my schedule look like if something was different? You may be uncertain as to the claimant's life expectancy or their return to work prospects. These uncertainties can have a significant monetary effect on your schedule, and therefore need consideration when providing advice to your client, either the claimant or an insurer, whether at the early stages of a claim or in the final stages of negotiation. In the previous version of piCalculator, this was relatively simple to achieve. You could just update the key facts of the claim and it would recalculate the schedule for you. This was great if the losses were the same, but we thought that we could go one better than that. Why not have the two scenarios side by side on the screen and provide the ability to include and exclude entire sections of losses from the scenarios? This capability was probably the biggest single driving force behind this version of piCalculator. It was simply not possible to add this functionality into the previous version, and was the starting point for our thoughts on design and layout of the new site, and making it easier to enter those changes to the underlying basis for the calculations. What surprised us as we started down this project was actually how versatile and powerful this functionality would become. So, why would you use a scenario? At its basic level, you can adjust the underlying data for your claim. When we launched this version, there was a lot of discount rate uncertainty, and this was a perfect demonstration of the scenario capability. Have the current discount rate alongside by side. For insurers, this had the added benefit of automatically calculating the reserves at 2.5% so that their actuaries can continue to model their reserve triangles. And for our first demonstration, that's actually what we're going to use today, is to have a look at how a claim, how you can recalculate your claim based on the potentially upcoming Ogden 8. So the first part here is how a schedule would look like in its basic form with no alterations. Yes. Zoom in a little bit. And the first part is to actually add the managed scenarios. So that's accessible from the left-hand side of the screen. If the management section is closed up, simply click on it, and we can then select the managed scenarios. Every schedule will have at least one scenario. This defaults to being called a base scenario, but you can edit it if you wish. So for this demonstration, I'm going to update our base scenario to Ogden 7, and I'm going to add in Ogden 8 and tell it to display in column 2. So at this point, the system goes off and it creates our Ogden 8 scenario, and we can see them side by side. And the first thing to point out is that the system, unfortunately, isn't psychic. So whilst we told it that we want an Ogden 8 scenario, it has just simply gone and copied our Ogden 7 scenario. But that's okay. So what we're going to do now is, if we go up to our data set and we click on our change data set, and if this is the first time that you've seen scenarios or a schedule with multiple scenarios, you will see that there is now a second set of options at the bottom of the pop-up box, asking us which scenarios we want to apply this change to. So if I select Ogden 8 draft and say that we want to apply it to our Ogden 8 scenario, and click on the change button, and the system goes away, and now we have our two scenarios running side by side. The first is taking all of our calculations and applying Ogden 7 to them, and our second set is now applying Ogden 8. And if we scroll down and have a look at our life expectancy and life multipliers, we can see that there's a slight change. Yes, this is the bad news for claimants, good news for insurers. Ogden 8, there will be a reduction in life expectancy as a result of the latest ONS figures. And if we scroll all the way down to our losses, we can see side by side that our loss of earnings, there's actually a slight increase in our loss of earnings because the earnings multiplier is slightly increased, but our care, which I've just got as a simple lifetime loss, has now reduced due to this lower multiplier. And that, in its basic form, that is the simplest way of how a scenario can work. But that in itself would be somewhat limiting. So let's now have a look at something slightly more intricate. So we're going to consider a slightly different scenario. We've got a 40-year-old claimant who had some underlying health conditions prior to an accident, and these have been exacerbated by the injury. Both sides have instructed experts, and would you believe it, the experts don't agree on the life expectancy. We are approaching a JSM and basically want to be prepared to see how they now look. So let's set up our claim. So once again, I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to look to add two more scenarios. So our first scenario will be our position. In this one, I'm going to be looking at it from the claimant's perspective. I'm going to add in a defendant position and, for the purposes of this, show a meet in the middle. So the system's now gone away and calculated our two additional scenarios, and as we would expect, they are now identical. So I'm now going to update the life expectancy, and I'm going to have three different positions on life expectancy. I'm going to have our position, our expert's position, which is a 5-year reduction from standard. And I'm going to apply a 15-year for our defendant position. And our meet in the middle, funnily enough, is going to be in the middle with a 10-year impairment. So straight away we can see, obviously, there's no change on our general damages and our past losses. This has only affected our future losses, as we've got in this particular instance, a single loss that is now running for rest of life and is finishing at the different life expectancies. If I now go into this care loss, we can see that within the particular loss, it will only show the actual calculation as per the currently selected scenario. But it's very easy to get to see what that calculation looks like with our different scenarios by making each scenario active. So we can have a look. So the defendant's position, which is our 15-year impairment. So now we can see that it's only running for 30 years with a reduced multiplier accordingly. And if we take the meet in the middle at 35 years. But that in itself, whilst useful, doesn't really reflect the realities of what different scenarios that you might want to consider whilst evaluating one of these claims. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you an additional piece of functionality that's contained within the sections. So to make this a little bit more obvious, I'm going to type in that this is going to be our position in respect of care, and I'm going to add two new sections, and I'm going to put in the defendant's position and a compromise position. So we were suggesting as the claimant that there was a requirement of $20,000 a year. The defendant's position was that it was £10,000 a year, and our compromise position going to suggest, funny enough, £15,000 per year. And immediately we can see that this causes somewhat of an issue because it's just added all of the total together. And that's where we start to use the section settings functionality within the system. So if we click on the section settings on here, and you'll see that there's a number of options that we can use, but on the first option is whether to include or exclude a section, a scenario from a particular section. So for the first scenario, I just want it to apply to our position, and then for the defendant position, just apply to the defendant's position, and for the meet in the middle, I just want it to apply for the compromise just for the meet in the middle. And you'll see now that it's telling us that we have sections within the care, but they are excluded from our particular scenario. And again, if we look through the defendant position, we can now see that our position calculation is excluded, as is the compromise position. We have our £10,000 a year calculation. And then if we look at our meet in the middle, we have our compromise calculation at £15,000 per year. And if we go back to our overview, and we can now see that we have the three scenarios being calculated, and we're ranging from defendant's position at just over £1 million to our position at 1.57 million. If we go back to the manage scenarios functionality, we can see within here that we can alter the layout and the order at which these particular scenarios appear on the screen. And so I'm going to set this up where our position as the claimant is over on the left hand side, the defendant position over on the right hand side, and our meet in the middle, or I think it's probably nicer to call it a compromise position. If I now click on save, it'll rearrange the scenarios. And essentially what we have now in front of us is essentially a live Scott schedule that we can work on and update as new information comes in from both our experts and also an update from in regards of the defendant's position in this claim. So moving on, wanted to just run through a slightly more involved scenario. And this one we're going to consider a loss of earnings scenario where our client has basically a chance of promotion. And we want to consider what the claim looks like in two particular scenarios. Our first scenario, I'll click on the right one. Our first scenario is that it is a definite promotion, and the second scenario is that there is a 50-50 chance that this promotion will take place. So again, first thing, I'm going to set up my two scenarios, and in this one I'm going to have a definite promotion, and our second scenario I'm going to call our 50-50 chance. So I'm going to put these side by side, and as we would expect, to start off with, these two scenarios are identical in their calculations. So I'm going to now edit my loss of earnings. And again, in this instance is going to require us to add two more sections. So I'm going to add a first section which has the promotion, and a third section I'm going to call no promotion. So at the moment we have a single loss that's running at £25,000 per year from calculation until retirement. So the first thing that I need to do is to edit this loss, and rather than it running to retirement, I'm going to have this first loss running until 55 years old. And my promotion, I'm going to add in 55 years old, promotion £35,000 per year net, and my no promotion is going to be just a continuation of the original claim running at £55,000, but remaining at the £25,000 net. So sorry, running from 55 until retirement, remaining at the £25,000 net. And what we're going to do now, so our first section is applicable to both scenarios. The promotion scenario, the promotion section, is applicable 100% to our definite promotion, but 50% chance to our 50-50 scenario. So I'm going to apply that change to the promotion. And as you see, because we're on the definite scenario, this doesn't have any effect to what we're seeing until we now change our no promotion, in which case we want to exclude it from the definite promotion scenario and update the 50-50 from 100% to 50%. And so that's now updated our screen as we would expect. So our definite promotion scenario is £25,000 per year until 55, and then an increase of £10,000 per year from 55 to retirement age. And if we then look at our 50-50 scenario, we can see that all three sections are applicable. Again, the £25,000 per year running until 55 years old. And we then have our two possibilities, one with our promotion discounted for probability at 50% and our no promotion section running also discounted for probability at 50%. And if we return to our overview, and we can see then running side by side, we've got our two scenarios available to us and giving us roughly a difference of just over £53,000. It is quite straightforward to export the scenarios side by side. So if we go into the export claim, so the main schedule document, the Word document that you'll be used to, will export as this currently active scenario. And if the active scenario is always the one that's on the left of the screen, it's also coloured in blue just to indicate that that's the active scenario. But the main Word schedule will just export to the individual selected scenario. However, the key facts and the Excel versions of the export, you do get the opportunity to export those side by side. So if we take a look at the Excel document, so if I now export the Excel file, and bring that onto the screen, and as you can see, you've got an Excel document with the two scenarios side by side, and you will then have a separate tab at the bottom of the Excel document for each of the scenarios. So all of the various calculations for the scenarios, including, as we can see here, the chance discounts on our 50-50 scenario are included, but we can see them side by side and all of the details for each of the scenarios. And that is basically as far as scenarios go. It's not a huge area in terms of running through what its capabilities are and demonstrating how they work. But I'm sure that you will appreciate that it is an area which gives you a massive amount of flexibility with putting together your schedule, so that you can really look at a what if scenario on those schedules. Every item, every set of options, every set of key underlying data can be altered within a scenario. So you can even have different calculation dates, you can have different life expectancies, you can have different retirement ages, you can have all of those different on those particular scenarios. We have seen schedules with up to 15, 16 different scenarios with all the various permutations running in terms of discounts for chance and opportunity. But it is really a set of functionality that we put together to just allow you a better understanding of how your schedule may or may not be affected by those particular changes, without having necessarily to move away from what is your primary schedule, in terms of, you know, this is the schedule that we will look to present either at a JSM or look to present to the court. But you can, by the side of it, have scenarios running that you may be considering to offer as a compromise to the other side. And that, bang on 30 minutes, is our run through of scenarios. If anybody has any questions, you can either drop them in now on the conversation part of Skype, or alternatively, if you want to get in touch on by email, piCalculatorsupport@verisk.com, then I'm sure that someone will be available to help. Okay, so Lindsay, you're welcome. Don't seem to have any questions coming in at the moment, so I am going to sign off at this point and just say, for all those that attended, thank you very much, and hope you have a good day, and look forward to catching up on the next webinars. Brilliant, and thank you.